this, there are hundreds of millions of fungi beneath your very feet as you walk around. Connecting all of the organisms in a forest is a vast web of fungi that interconnect each tree to one another, allowing them to trade and communicate with one another constantly throughout the day. Without these fungal networks, no trees would be able to survive, and neither would we. As a molecular biology major, I'm beyond fascinated with this stuff, and I'm very excited to share with you all how these systems work. I will cover how these fungi systems work, how they interconnect trees in a forest, and their overall importance to life as we know it. So fungi that live in trees and on their roots create fungal networks. They can range in size from 1 centimeter big to up to 10 acres big. According to T. Horton in Mycorrhizal Networks, the largest living organism in the world is a fungi in the northern Oregon coast, and it's 2.5 miles long and 3 miles wide. So here's a diagram of a basic fungal network. You're all probably familiar with a mushroom, which is essentially the fruit of a fungi, almost as if an apple would be a fruit of a tree. It's a very small part of the entire whole. The main part of the fungi is the underground mycelium network. The mycelia are these long tube-like structures that are thread-like, and they act almost as pipes connecting roots of trees to other trees, allowing nutrients, water, and sugars to flow between them. So the interconnections between mycelia and trees are there, but why? Well, trees are able to produce carbon, but are not able to gather nutrients on their own. And without nutrients, no plant would be larger than an inch or two tall. The nutrients are necessary for the bark, branches, and leaves for their structure and for them to be able to exist. And fungi need sugar or carbon because without that, they would not be able to have structure or energy in order to move and survive. So essentially what they do is they live together and they trade with one another. The fungi gather nutrients and the trees produce sugar and they trade. The fungi gather nutrients by mining, hunting, and decomposing for it. The first is mining. According to T. Horton in Mycorrhizal Networks and Eric Fernandez in Mycorrhizal, the long tube-like structures of the mycelia will wiggle back and forth underground until they hit a pocket of nutrients such as a rock. They then secrete acid, which breaks it down, and it can then absorb the nutrients inside of that rock, trading into the trees. The next is by hunting insects. That long thread-like structure that fungi have, they're able to wrap around insects that live underground, suffocating them and killing them, and then absorbing all the nitrogen out of their body. And nitrogen is essential for life on Earth. We get it from plants as we eat it, and plants get it from the fungi that get it from insects, and it's a constant cycle. And that is according to Denkamp in Rhizobium, that they use this thread-like structure in order to move and wrap around insects. And the third is the most common, and that's decomposing. Constantly, mushrooms and fungi are decomposing fruit and animals on the forest floor. It's all over the place. And according to Radiolab in their podcast From Tree to Shining Tree, scientists traced salmon that was left on the forest floor from a bear, and they tracked the carbon that was found in the salmon to the surrounding trees around it and even 2.5 miles away. So constantly, these fungi are breaking down stuff on the forest floor and transporting it all over the place, from here to the upper campus and back down. So essentially, trees create the sugar in order to trade to the fungi, and fungi gather nutrients to trade it to the trees. And here's a demo that I kind of created for us. So on the far left, you have the yellow dots, and that's the sugar that the trees are creating in photosynthesis. And once they make that, they then send it down underground to these white tube-like structures. That's the fungi network that's underneath. And once the fungi receive that, they also receive water from trees because roots are able to look for water and suck it in much easier than fungi. And the blue dots over there by the river is the roots of a tree sucking that in and donating that to the fungi networks. And once these fungi get what they need, they then give back the nutrients that they get from the forest floor and underneath that they mine and hunt for, and they give all of that to the trees in order for them to grow and flourish as we see them in everyday life. Up to 75% of the sugar that trees make, they actually give away, which is kind of counterintuitive because that's what trees spend their constant life doing. And that is according to A. Reiner in Mycological Research. As well as the nutrients that fungi create, they give up to 50% of what they gather. Now that you understand how fungi trade with trees, let's take a look at this wood wide web that forests have. They use the fungi to interconnect with the trees around them, talk, communicate, and trade. According to D. Johnson in Underground Signals, the oldest tree in a forest can be connected to 47 trees around it, and each of these trees to 20 other trees. That means that an older tree in a forest can be indirectly connected to upwards of 1,000 surrounding plants around it. So a forest is essentially one large organism made up of a ton of small ones that are working together to survive. And here's a demo of how this works. So in the middle, we have an old tree in the middle of the forest. It's thriving with lots of sunlight. It's able to produce a lot of sugar and in turn get a lot of nutrients from the soil. And the trees that are surrounding in the shade, they're not going to be able to do as well. But a tree that's doing well will give away its sugar that it creates to the surrounding plants, just smaller ones in the forest floor that aren't able to create their own sugar. And it doesn't matter if they're the same species or different species. They still help one another in hope that when they're not doing as well, that older tree, they'll receive it back from other plants. So for example, in the middle we have a redwood, and then surrounding are fir trees. If the redwoods are doing well in one generation, they'll give out to the plants around them, and then in later generations they'll do the same thing back. And if a disease enters a forest, or a invasive species such as an aphid, trees will send chemicals along with their sugars to tell other organisms that there's something invading them, and they can release chemicals to help fight this off. If a tree is dying, you will see it give away all of its carbon to the surrounding trees to help them survive through mass extinction. And if there's an invader, they'll send chemicals to release toxins to fight off these invaders. They can also release toxins that'll make like a fruit taste bad, hopefully deterring animals from eating them. And if one species is dying, the rest of them will help it. They donate sugar, water, and nutrients to help them survive in hopes that one day they'll help them survive when they're dying. My final point is the importance of this interconnection. Plants are not just single organisms. It's almost like how a bee in a beehive is one part of a large whole, and if you take that part out, the rest of it will die. This is seen in the Pacific Northwest right now. As people are clear-cutting specific species of trees, the entire ecosystem dies. Everything does. And so if you take one part out, it will not be able to thrive. It is important to understand the complexity of everything around you. There's so much more going on than you know, and it's enjoyable to be able to appreciate this stuff. As I end my speech, I hope you not only remember the cool facts about the fungi and trees that live in forests and the plants around us in everyday life, but also the different species help out one another for the better of their existence, and I hope we can too. Thank you.